Ja, zeker.
Let's go.
This podcast is made for a mature audience. We talk in depth about mental health and the physical and mental toll that comes with it. Thank you for listening.
All right. Welcome back to the Just Like You and Me podcast. We have Gianna Giorgio with us. Gianna, it's great to have you.
Good to be here.
Gianna is the younger sister of Mike Giorgio, a former podcast guest, a very popular, awesome guest that we had on.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on. We were talking a little bit, and so we focus a lot on faith and formation stories on here. And when we were talking a couple weeks ago, you mentioned your faith journey, and it was really interesting. And I think it would connect a lot with people that listen to this podcast. Mm-hmm. So, kind of where, if you don't mind, talking about like your faith journey and where it started and kind of where it's going now.
So I was a cradle Catholic. Born and raised, and I kind of had like some rough patches in my childhood, and I was a very like anxious kid. And like as I got older, I kind of started realizing like I have no clue how to process an emotion, and I don't know how to feel things like at a normal level. I feel like my whole life I have never reacted to anything normally. Like I've always been like way too much. And so I kind of started turning away from the faith as I got older. Like when I hit 15 probably is when I really was like, okay, I'm done with this. Like I don't want to do it anymore. And it was really difficult to even like acknowledge that, because like being raised Catholic, it's like your identity. You know what I mean? Like it becomes part of you. And especially when like your parents are really Catholic and like, you know, they're encouraging you to do all of these things. And it's like, well, I just don't want to do this anymore. I couldn't figure out why in my childhood I had to like deal with anything hard. I was an innocent child. Like I didn't need to have a hard time. You know, God should have been there. Everyone says he's like ever loving, like all gracious God. Yet there I was like such like an anxious, scared child. And I was like, God was never there to protect me. You know what I mean? Like he was never there. Like people say he's loving, but I've never felt that. And it was like really rough for me to like even feel those emotions, because they're real emotions, even if they're not true. You actually feel them like they're true. And so when I was 15, I started kind of getting into it with my parents a lot. Not just kind of like, I mean, like a lot. And, that's pretty common with young teenagers, but it was like, it wasn't like normal getting into it with your parents. I was like a very problematic teenager, and I had very clear issues, but I didn't want anyone to know that. So I developed anorexia, and I started cutting, again, when I was around like 15. And I didn't reveal any of that to my parents, but I was always in like a terrible mood, because I was either starving or in pain or just really angry. And so like, even though I never told them any of that, they didn't know. To them, it just looked like I was being like a hellion, and I was like being so unreasonable about everything, which again, if you look at it from a different perspective, I was, because like nobody knew the underlying problems. And it kind of came to a head in like probably December of 2020, before I turned 16. And I told my mom I haven't eaten for 3 days. And she got so angry that my dad had to kind of intervene and be like, none of this is helping. So they sat me down at the counter and like watched me eat. And then my mom said, you're going to the doctor. And so they didn't put me in like therapy. They put me in counseling. So with a Catholic doctor. And for 6 months, I was put on like anorexia watch. So basically I had to keep like a journal of everything that I ate every day. I had to go to the doctor every week and get weighed, but I had to like turn away from the scale because I wasn't allowed to see my weight. And like we got my weight back up to, what was healthy for someone my age. And after about 6 months of that, my doctor diagnosed me with depression and general anxiety disorder. So I was not functioning how I needed to be. And even though it's like, well, everybody has problems, you know what I mean? Like everybody goes through things and life is hard for everyone. But for someone with depression, doing simple tasks that might be easy for someone who doesn't have depression is like almost impossible for someone who does have depression. And like, I really hated admitting that I was like weak or that I couldn't like do things on my own. And I was like, I don't want like help from someone. And I don't want to be labeled as like, you're depressed or whatever. But it was like, I needed to be diagnosed with that so that we could continue treating it. And so 6 months after I got diagnosed with depression, we did like every lifestyle change in the book. So we fixed my sleep schedule. I was eating healthily. I was exercising like 5 days a week. And like my grades started going back up in school and things were getting in check. But I still, like, though my life was improving and like things were going how they needed to be, my mental state wasn't changing. And I was still like angry. I was still cutting. And I wasn't really going anywhere. And so my doctor prescribed me an antidepressant. And we started on like the lowest possible dose to, acclimate my body, and then slowly went up from there. But even on the antidepressant, I started being able to do things how I needed to be doing them. Because again, like, I had obligations. Like I had school, I had a job, I, had a ton of animals to take care of. And I was doing all of that, but it was so much more difficult than it needed to be. And so I kept seeing my doctor, and we kept, trying different things. And she said, okay, I think you need to get your spiritual life in check. And at this point, I'm like, absolutely not. Don't even suggest that. Like, God has nothing to do with this. Again, I hated to admit that I was weak and that I needed something other than myself to do anything. Like whether it was my parents or my family or God or a doctor, I did not want to admit that I needed something else to help me. And so she was like, well, you don't really have a choice because this is part of treatment. And every other week I started seeing my doctor and then my priest. So like every other week, but like rotating. And he would always offer confession at the beginning of like our talks, because I was kind of just going to him for counseling as well. But I would a lot of the time just refuse it because I didn't want it. So I was in a near constant state of mortal sin. I was not receiving sacraments. And I know this is hard to believe, but that makes everything a lot harder. that makes life a lot harder, especially when you're a Catholic. And when you know like the benefits of the sacraments and you've felt the benefits of the sacraments before, to actively ignore them and block them out makes everything a lot harder. But again, I really didn't want to admit that because I was so mad that like God wasn't there, and I never felt God, and I felt like it was all like a ruse, and that religion was a scam and everyone was being fooled, and like no one was understanding things the way I'm understanding things, because I'm just so much different. And I came to a point where I was just like, I don't know what to do with this anymore. Like I don't know what to do with this anymore, and I don't want to seek out God anymore. And so I just stopped. And I still had to go to church because I lived with my parents who were Catholic, and I was underage, so the rule is if you're underage and you live with your parents, you have to go to church. But I didn't really participate like in my faith. I wasn't active in my faith. I didn't like my parents would be like, hey, there's this retreat going on. I'd be like, no, absolutely not. And like my parents, they pray a lot. They pray every day, and they would be like, come say a rosary. Nope, I don't want to do it. And it was like I was digging myself deeper and deeper into this hole of like things that were bad happened to me, and that has to be someone's fault. And if everyone is just, they're all just human, everyone makes mistakes, then whose fault is it ultimately? Like why does this have to be like this person's fault or this person's fault or my fault? Like it can't just be on me. Like that can't be right. You know what I mean? And so I was directing my anger, my emotions that I didn't know what to do with, inwardly. And that's why I, developed the coping mechanism of cutting, which is like so utterly damaging to your mentality and your soul. And that I struggled with for 4 years. And like, I get a lot of questions about my scars. And I'm not uncomfortable about that at all, actually. I don't mind talking about it. I don't mind being completely truthful. But like, it's kind of weird when sometimes it's like kids will ask and I don't really know what to say. I'm like, oh, it's just a story for another day, oh, it's nothing. Like there's some times where you can't really say anything. But I'm very open about it because I feel like someone needs to be, if like someone's going to ask me a question about it, I feel like they have a right to know. And like, I did this to myself, obviously. And so if someone has a question about something that I did, I'm going to take accountability for it and I'm going to answer them. And I don't have any problem doing that. But it's still like, the consequences of my own actions, and it's like biting me in the butt, but but yeah, I'm almost 6 months clean now.
That's absolutely amazing.
Right.
Yeah. I'm happy you're open and talking about it. I have to, things are like improving, getting better, but I'm like, it's a thing that people don't talk about. That's what we were talking about like a couple weeks ago. No one talks about mental health in like the true fashion. It's more of just a broad statement, and it's like, we don't talk about it because it's sensitive.
Yeah.
But it's super important. But so continuing the story though, like where did you kind of have that like almost an aha moment where maybe faith is real?
Yeah. So I think it was the summer of 2022. I was still, I was on a medication that was helping me. I was, on a really good path, with my job and my family, and like everything was going really well, but I was still, cutting, and I was still grappling with my faith. And I went to church one day because it was like sometime in the summer, they were having a confession day, but the kind of confession where everyone kind of like scatters into pews, and then your priest walks and he comes in and he sits next to you and you do confession like that. And I walked in and I like went all the way to the back and I sat down and I just started crying immediately. And I was like, I just don't understand. Like I was, praying internally, and I was like, I don't understand and I don't get it. I don't understand. Like everyone says to follow God's plan, but that is not easy when God's plan seems to just like absolutely suck so far. You know what I mean? It's like, it's awful and I hate it. And I don't want to have to follow, all of these rules and these people, trying to tell me just pray more and you'll feel better. Pray more and you'll understand. And it's like, I have been praying all the time, and I'm asking and I'm getting no answers. And what I didn't understand at the time was like, prayers never go unanswered. It's just that sometimes the answer is no. And I truly think that this was something that God was kind of like, you're doing this to yourself. Like this is, the answers and you've been taught the answers your entire life, but you are convincing yourself otherwise, and you're doing this yourself, and you're damaging yourself mentally and physically as a way to, to fight that. And it's not beneficial to you or to anybody. And I had confession with my priest, and it was, it was really good. We talked, and I went outside and I sat down in my car and I was like, wait a minute. I get it. I had this moment that I was like, no, but I understand now. And I was like, everything that has happened was a lesson. It was all something that I was supposed to learn from. And like, that's why when people ask me like, well, do you regret the decisions? Absolutely not. I don't regret any decision that I made. Even if it was the worst decision of my life, I truly believe that everywhere I have been and everywhere I am going is exactly where God wanted me to be at that time. Because some things are just lessons. And like, lessons hurt sometimes. Like if you get a God lesson, I mean, that hurts a lot sometimes. And it hurt me a lot to know that like all of it was necessary, but I have grown so much from all of my experiences with, not getting along with my parents, to absolutely grappling with my faith, like with everything in me. And it was all so difficult and so hard, but it brought me to where I am now. And right now, the blessings never end. The blessings are just always pouring in. And, I do believe that whether I am absolutely miserable or the happiest I've ever been, it's where God needs me and wants me to be. But even after that, like, realization, I was still cutting, because that was like something that I just couldn't get over. So it was like really hard.
Yeah. When you're like, I don't want to go too deep in everything, but like, so what I've heard about like cutting is like
Right.
a outward expression of the internal pain you might be
Yes.
having.
Yeah.
So after you kind of had that moment where you kind of were a little bit more at peace, do you know where that kind of stayed in, where you're like, you still had that kind of
Right.
internal battle?
At that point, it was an addiction.
Okay.
So it was, it started out as a coping mechanism, obviously maladaptive. That is not a normal way to cope. I hate to break it to you guys, but that is not normal at all. And like, it's not acceptable, as much as people may tell you to be like sympathetic. It's not something you should be sympathetic to or about. I really don't believe that you should be. But at that point, it was an addiction, because I had been cutting at that point for like 2.5 years, 3 years. And I was like, I need this. You know what I mean? Like, I have these urges. And again, I didn't know how to react to emotions. So whenever I was angry or I was sad, I didn't want that expression to show. I didn't want anyone to know that. Like, if I got into a fight with my parents, I wouldn't express that I was upset about it. I wouldn't show anger or like frustration or anything like that. I would just excuse myself and go up to my room and cut instead, because I didn't want people to know that I was weak, because I felt like if I expressed emotions or let people see like these inner parts of me that are vulnerable, then I'm less. You know what I mean? And that's not true either, but I didn't know that at the time. So kind of where that like turned around was the summer of 2023. So it was still like another year. Cutting is about control. When you can't control the situation around you, that's also what anorexia is about. Like, when you can't control a situation around you, you want to control anything you can. And because I was such an anxious child, I have always been like obsessed with controlling every situation. And so I couldn't control my life at home with my parents. I was a minor, so obviously they were responsible for me and they could tell me to do whatever they wanted. And I didn't like being controlled. So I took control in other parts of my life that I could, whether it was anorexia or cutting. And so with cutting, it became kind of this like, okay, there's rules and regulations and there's like rituals that you have to follow, or you're losing control of this thing. And it's really becoming a problem instead of just like, oh, something that I do. You know what I mean? And so it was the summer of 2023. And this is kind of graphic, because I mean, cutting is a graphic thing, but I scared myself by losing that control. And I cut way too deep. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is not okay. Like, this is not normal. And probably like one of my mom's like worst memories of our relationship was that I went to her after that. I came downstairs and I said, I think I need stitches. And she said, you're still cutting? Like, she had no idea, because she thought that I had stopped back when I started therapy. But I hadn't. I was just like really good at concealing those kinds of things. And so, she helped me like bandage it, and we got like a butterfly strip to close it. And that was kind of like so utterly shocking to me, like the adrenaline rush that gave me, and like the fear that instilled in me. I was like, wow, like, this is really, really out of control. And it's so scary, because I have built everything around this habit and the fact that I have complete control over whatever happens with this. Because when I don't have control over another situation, it drives me insane. But now I don't have control over this either. And that's driving me insane. And so my regular habit was to cut like every week or every other week, but it kind of started spreading out to like a month or like 2 months. But again, it was still like an addiction, and I was getting a lot better at it, but I was still learning how to process my emotions and like, filter them correctly and react to them well. But it kind of came to an end in December, actually. My boyfriend, which you guys both know, obviously, he knew that I was still cutting, and one day he was just like, "You have to stop." And I said, "What are you talking about? You are so silly." And he was like, "I'm being so serious. You are not allowed to do that ever again." And I was like, you can't do this. You can't do that to me. Like, this is the one thing that I have fallen back on for the last 4 years. The one thing that works, the one thing that brings me comfort. It's the only thing I know. And he stared at me and he said, "It sounds like you're replacing God with cutting." And I said, "I'm sad. I can't reply to that. Like, I can't." There is no comeback after that. And so he made me like collect all my razor blades, which I had them everywhere. I kept a razor blade in an ibuprofen bottle in the glove box of my car. Like, I had them everywhere because I needed, like, if I was anywhere and I got any negative feeling, I needed to immediately like be able to nip that in the bud. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want anyone to see any vulnerable side of me. And so I got all my razor blades from all my, hidden spaces and put them in my little tin box, and I gave them to him, and I haven't seen them since. And it was really hard for the first like 1 or 2 months, but then it's only gotten easier from there. And it's like, I don't feel a need to ever revert. You know what I mean? Like, it's so much easier now to just like pray and then I feel fine. Like,
That's beautiful.
Again, the blessings, like, they have not ended.
Yeah.
And I am very thankful for that, for sure.
Yeah. Sometimes the hardest is that first step. And
Right.
just taking it all and throwing it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was shocked when I was homeschooled.
Mm-hmm.
Those people mostly probably know. And the amount when I went to high school for a couple classes, the amount of people that did that. And it was like a normal thing, but didn't talk about it.
Right.
It happened all the time. And people just didn't know how to process those emotions and didn't even know how to get help or actually like find that. And for you, it had to be like that one time where it's like, wait, this is real. This is out of my control. And then to have someone who you love
Right.
really just confront you about it in a
really
nice
pushed me.
nice way and really get you to that next step and have that help. But yeah, it's mental health is such a crazy thing that goes on right now.
Yeah.
I had a friend that she would do the same types of things, and from the outside you would have no idea.
Exactly.
And she was like super happy, great family, all those types of things. And I tell her brothers, I'm like, hey, like, you need to help your sister. And they're like, no, she's fine. I'm like, I'm telling you right now,
Right.
this is what's going on. And I pray that she's better now. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, thank you for like sharing like that story. It's not an easy thing, but it's a thing that people need to talk about and also kind of work through like those emotions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so with like anxiety and stuff like that, where is there a prayer or something you kind of fall back onto? I was told like in confession by a priest, like whenever you have like a temptation or an inclination to do something, just kind of have like go-to prayers almost, where it's like, all right, just straight go to it, easy. Have you found any help in like something like that?
Yeah, so I actually just recently started like a prayer journal where I write my own prayers for specific feelings or situations, so that I have something to like, kind of ground me again. And so I don't have them like memorized by heart, but I know that the prayer that I wrote down for anxiety is, just asking God to help me trust where he is bringing me and that he won't abandon me, and that whether I feel like he's with me or not, he's always there, like to remind me that I am grounded in my identity as a child of God, whether or not I feel like that. And
that's cool. I don't know if it died or something, but yeah, they're after us. Is the computer still charging? No, the fun technical difficulties. We'll be right back. And now we're officially back. But you're talking about like your go-to prayers a little bit.
Right. So I just asked God to remind me that I am grounded in my identity as his child, and that wherever I'm going, he'll be there with me. And I wish I had brought the book, because when I'm actually like praying, what I write makes sense, but then when I try to say it like without reading it, doesn't make sense. But it's really helpful to keep a prayer journal for sure, because like in those moments of vulnerability with God, you are saying things mentally that should be written down, you know what I mean? Because you should be able to repeat these things. And like, if you're getting lost in prayer, then you don't usually remember what you were asking for, what you were saying exactly. But I like to pray with a journal with me so that I can write down, because in the moment, what I'm, saying, what I'm praying is actually helping me to feel better. And I want to be able to go back to that and to have it, continue to help me, because obviously if it's what I'm praying just naturally, then it's on my heart, and I should keep that in my back pocket. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, having go-to prayers is super important, and understanding like you are a loved child of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I really loved what you said is like, it's all a lesson. You're all learning something, and it's not fun most of the time. I mean, we all can go back to times in our lives where it's just really, really rough. Mm-hmm. And you feel like no one loves me. God hates me. God, why is he doing this to me? Mm-hmm. But once you have the understanding and you're able to get out of it, and it works. It's like that thing that everyone says, like, you pray for patience,
right? And
God gives you opportunities to be patient.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, please, like just give it to me. Yeah, like please. It just makes it so much easier. And I think it's like people cope in many different ways. Right. Like, so obviously there's those type of things people do, over drinking, nicotine, certain things. Nicotine is bad for you. Don't do it. We don't do it.
Oh yeah.
Any type of substance abuse.
Yeah, and it can start off like so innocently, and then once you get that reliance on it,
right?
And a lot of people don't have good coping mechanisms. I mean, if you look at the world right now, we have a lot of coping mechanism issues. Like, there's a lot of roots to a lot of things, but that's one of them. And that's where people need to understand they're loved by God. We've had even many converts come on, and even they didn't know that God loved them. I think it was not even a convert. It was Ryan. He didn't know that God loved him. It was just the church authority and obligation. But right. Are you truly loved? You were, and you mentioned this, and I love that. Like before you were born, you were made and loved by God. Before your parents were born, they were made and loved by God. And there's a path and a meaning to everyone's life. And finding that's super important, understanding that it's not going to be easy, but it will be worth it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the problem, especially nowadays, is everyone always hears that one phrase, which is kind of true, but it can be taken in many different wrong ways, which is like moderation is key. And I think a lot of people take that as like, okay, well, you can do pretty much anything that you want as long as you have some sort of moderation, right? Like I can drink this healthy amount because I'm moderating the amount that I'm doing, or I can smoke this amount of weed because I'm moderating the amount that it can do. But every one of these things that releases some sort of like unhealthy chemical in your body that keeps you going back to that thing, your desire and want for what it is that you're releasing is only going to grow, because your body and your mind are both naturally acclimated towards wanting more and more and more of something, right? And if you're not directing what that something is, you'll fall into anything. There's a book called The Artist by what's his name? The Artist. Yeah, you can look it up. The Artist. It's a it's a postmodern book. It's a really good story. It's written by the same guy who wrote a book called Ulysses, and I don't know why I can't think of his name. But the book is about this guy who is a university student who doesn't make up his mind in what kind of worldview he wants to have. And so and that comes from a very controlling point of view where he wants to be in total charge of what he wants in his life. He doesn't want to be influenced by anything. He just wants to have his own worldview. But the problem is that he can't choose anything, and so all of a sudden, he becomes subject to everything and all of the really bad things. Ed Veer? Maybe look up Portrait of a Young Artist, maybe? Look up Ulysses.
Gotta be better than that, Brian.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, look up Ulysses. That's his more known book. I don't know why I can't think of
Give
his
him
name.
credit.
He's a really, really well-known author. But, Ulysses, Ulyses.
We're keeping this all in. Show this to Jeanette.
James Joyce. Oh my gosh, thank you. Yes, very, very, very well-known author. But it's so true.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I have definitely fallen prey to this in my own life, where I obviously didn't go through the same experience that you did. A lot of people don't, but a lot of people have their own experiences, right, with different things that they'll abuse in their own addictions, where you almost do it like it's a control. It's a sense of control, right, in your own life. Like you're controlling everything that you want, but it's also a silent cry for help, right? You're almost doing it because you think that you're magnetizing people to like want to come and help you.
Yeah.
And I know for myself, all the things that I did wrong when I was in college, where there was a period of my life where I wasn't receiving the sacraments either. And I was literally at a Catholic college. And it was simply because I didn't want to go to confession.
Right.
I wanted the priest to ask me to come to confession. And I went for probably, I don't even know, probably 4 or 5 months without like really going to mass or anything like that. I was at mass, but I wasn't receiving. And it just really wanted the priest. And ultimately, like the same thing, I went and told my dad that, hey, I haven't been receiving the Eucharist for a little while. And he was like, well, why not? And I was like, because I just want someone to come help me. And he's like, no one is going to come help you.
Right.
You need to make the choice yourself. And that is it kind of, I don't know if you find that kind of similar to your story, where, you know, you ultimately tell someone, right? And you need that person to just tell you, okay, you need to stop doing this.
Right.
Right. But it only becomes a realized sense where, like, yes, like there's the aspect of having an accountability buddy, which I think is like, incredibly important, like having that accountability partner, someone who will always bring you back to what it is you need to go. But those accountability buddies only work if they have God in the middle as well, right? It needs to bring you back to God, right? So it's not just a 2-person relationship, and this is how it is in marriage as well. Marriage doesn't work when it's just a husband and a wife, right? There has to be God, the Holy Spirit, right? There has to be that aspect of God actually inside your relationship. It's actually a 3-person relationship in any type of thing that goes on. That's the only way that this ever works, is if you have your person with you, right? You have a relationship with something that pulls you back into the right thing, but they're pulling you back into something that's actually good.
Yeah.
Right? That's how it was for me, at least.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, pulling away, that's what the devil wants us to do. That's like the whole guilt of sin.
Right.
Like, I'm not good enough. Oh, I did this thing. Oh, I'll never be forgiven. Are you kidding me? I'm the only one I've ever done this. Like, how many billions of people in this world, and you're the only one that has that problem?
Right. Yeah.
I understand it because I've thought that way, and I'm sure most people have, but it's not. You're not alone, and there's help. There's so many people that want to help you. Awesome, like counselors, therapists, priests. Like, that's a huge part of their job, is ministering to people who want to help, who want to talk to you, who have that little bit of actual intellectual, like, theology with it. You know, it's really, really cool in that sense. But as you're growing up and you kind of unveiled that, you see, okay, this is how things are more. I'm not the only one that has this.
Yeah.
Is there certain places you see it more, or like in college or in high school, you're like, okay, these people don't realize that they're kind of blinded by this?
I honestly don't know. I come from a really small parish that has like only old people. So I kind of felt like it was so hard for me to come back to the faith after kind of mentally dismissing it, because I didn't have anyone immediately surrounding me who believed what I was trying to forget, number one, minus my parents, which obviously when you're 15, you want nothing but to ignore them. And I didn't have like Catholic friends, and there was not like any young adults group at my church. And all of my siblings, I don't have Catholic siblings, so I wasn't surrounded by Catholic family or anything like that. And so I feel like it was kind of extra hard to come back because I couldn't really talk to anyone who I thought would like understand my point of view or my perspective. And so I do definitely notice in other people traits in me now that I can like really see it from a different perspective than when I first kind of unveiled it or figured it out. I definitely see traits that I used to have or traits that I even still have, you know, in other people. And I think it's really easy for someone who was anorexic to immediately spot the other anorexic, or someone who was, you know, a self-harm addict to spot another self-harm addict. And I definitely am able to, I think it really made me a lot more empathetic. Like I'm an extremely sensitive person. I cry probably every day. Good tears, bad tears, you know, it's a mix. But like I finally am able to let myself feel emotions without shame. Like it's still embarrassing, don't get me wrong, but I cry in front of people all the time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, don't look at me. Like, this is literally disgusting. But like, I need to let myself like cry right now because I spent so much time like not letting myself do that like now I'm just like, okay, it's fine. Like, I'm just going to cry in front of you and you need to not talk about it. And yeah, it's definitely like I empathize with everyone now. Like, not just people who share my own opinions or my views, but I empathize with literally everyone. I understand where everyone is coming from. Like, I don't have siblings that share any of my beliefs. They are all over the political, religious spectrum, and they don't even really agree with each other all that much, and they're absolutely cut from a different cloth than I am on that basis. But I completely understand why they believe what they believe. Like, you know, I have siblings who are liberals. I understand. Like, I completely get why you believe that. And it kind of angers me when people will like, you know, try to like badmouth my siblings or like people I know for their opinions. I'm like, hey, if you don't get it, that's a you problem. Like, I get it. Like, you need to let them like, because they're feeling real emotions. You know what I mean? Like, when I was younger, I was feeling real emotions, and I still empathize with the younger version of myself. Like, yes, I was feeling those emotions, even if to other people they didn't make sense and they weren't true. But they, you know, mind is always over matter. Like, it's always mind over matter. Everything is mental. Like, very few things are physical, especially when it comes to spirituality and mental health. Like, there's almost never any like physical what's the word?
Ailment? I don't know.
Like, outward sign of like mental illness, you know, until like there's people who are so depressed that they can't get out of bed. That's like a kind of different realm. But like functioning people with depression, there's no like outward signs. That's like why you said you couldn't see it in one of your friends unless you really took a close look. And you know, she seemed happy on the outside and she seemed normal, but like when you kind of scraped away the surface, you could see other things. So.
They're getting to that vulnerability.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And I love that how you said everyone has like emotions and they're valid. They might not be always right.
They might not be true at all.
Yeah, but
I understand.
Yeah, they're real for them.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing that you said. And I think we talked about that with Dominic Gemma, talking more about, I was lost my train of thought. We'll get back. Like with Protestants.
Yeah.
And not say, oh, you're depressed, you must be this, this, and this. It looks different for everybody, and we need to meet them where they're at, and be grateful that you're even having a conversation with them in that type of sense. And it's not always like saying, oh, you feel this way, do this, this, and this.
Right.
That's not helpful.
Yeah.
It's listening and letting them kind of work it out.
Yeah.
And really having that empathy for them and true love for them. that's where you see actual growth.
Mhm.
That's what I mean. That's exactly where you see it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to have the recognition that we're all broken people,
Right.
right? Like every single person is broken in some sort of way. Like, and it's all unique to how we experience it, right? In many ways, people are all broken in similar ways, but we experience it in our own unique way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like even Jesus cried in the garden, right? Before his crucifixion, like he was bawling his eyes out, right? So much to the point that apparently he was literally sweating blood. Like
Yeah.
he was just so anxious. And I always find it kind of funny that he, right after that, he chastises the disciples for not being awake.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you know, for us, you would never want someone to see you in a state like that, right? Because we're really insecure about that stuff. But Jesus is almost like, why weren't you with me in my time of anxiety, in my time of like not necessarily depression, but you know, why weren't you with me in my state of depression, right? Jesus is vulnerable like that, and he asks us to be vulnerable like that with him, right? And oftentimes we completely shut ourselves out. We're like the disciples. We close our eyes and sleep while everyone else around us is just suffering, right? Jesus asks us to do the reverse of that.
Right.
And, you know, it has to come from, I think, kind of like what you said, you have to have the recognition that we have to improve in some sort of way.
Yeah.
Because I think that mental health has become this really big buzzword in today's society. And it's kind of funny, like, we always say, like, we don't really talk about it because, you know, to a certain extent, we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's all we talk about now, right? Like, the whole idea of self-care on social media is such a big thing. It's such a big topic. And you kind of wonder, like, you know, in terms of a society, we're probably talking about self-care more than any other aspect of human society has ever talked about it. So why are we the most depressed?
Yeah.
And it's because when you start talking about all this stuff, people tend to we don't talk about the solution. We only talk about the fact that we're feeling depressed in these sort of ways. The end of all these conversations at the end, like, you have to realize there has to be some sort of improvement. There has to be some sort of solution that people are seeking. And I think sometimes people, like, we're all still stuck in that stage of just wanting people to feel bad for us, right? Just wanting to be in control of something. Like, we just want to be like the center of something. So you want people to just like reach out to you. You don't actually care about improving because then you lose that aspect of control over people, right?
There has to be some sort of resolution.
Yes.
Some sort of change. I mean, there's also a lot of therapists and counselors that could not also just be not a part of the solution, but a part of the problem. Like, if you come and just take it away. Yeah.
So I do agree. There's a huge problem with overdiagnosis of mental illness in our society. And again, I wasn't a person who like wanted to seek out like a diagnosis because I wanted whatever prescription pill I could get. You know what I mean? But I was a problem. Like, I was a problem in other people's lives, not just my own. So like my parents were like, go. But I did, after I saw my doctor, she's just my primary doctor. She happens to be Catholic, and she offered to counsel me and to be like my monitor, basically. And after I moved on from that, I was like 17 or 18 at this point. And I was like, hey, Mom and Dad, I actually want to start like real therapy, like with a therapist. And so my mom reached out to different people. Sorry, I just hit the microphone. Reached out to different people in the homeschool group, and got recommended a Catholic doctor, a Catholic therapist, and I started seeing her, and it did nothing for me. I would go and I would bring her like a problem that I was dealing with, and she would say, "How does that make you feel?" And I'd be like, I just told you exactly how that made me feel. And if I have to say that again, I'm going to scream. Like, I never got anything out of her other than, okay. I think you're feeling this. How does that make you feel? Like, I know what I'm feeling. I'm telling you what I'm feeling. I want you to tell me how to get over it.
Yeah.
Not like, I understand. I'm so self-aware at this point. I know exactly what's going on. I just need you to give me advice as a doctor on how to like get over the hump. You know what I mean? And And so, yeah, there's a lot. I mean, and this was a Catholic therapist. And I thought, like, okay, perfect. Like someone who shares the beliefs that I'm trying to like replenish in my life. And, you know, I'm on a good track and I just need someone educated to tell me, you know, someone educated on mental health to tell me what to do when I'm feeling certain ways, or like, you know, how to deal with certain situations. And I got nothing. And I was like, after I think probably 4 or 5 months of seeing her, I just told my parents, I'm done with therapy. Like, you know what? I'm okay now. Like, I have tried so hard. I'm actually fine, and I don't care.
So
like,
she worked.
I guess it worked because I got so sick of talking about my problems. I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I just don't want to do it anymore.
I think a lot of people go to those type of therapists because they get reassured.
Yeah.
Because they want to have a problem.
Right. And for some people, reassurance works. And for some people, that kind of like, let me help your thought process along works. But that's not what I needed. That's not what I was coming to her with. And that's not the angle I was at. Like, you know, we were just completely on different levels, and it did not work.
Yeah, and it's something that I was talking when I was a paramedic is like you have to treat the patient, not the monitor.
Yeah.
So that you're coming with like depression symptoms.
Yeah.
It's not boom, 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 boom.
It's not a textbook.
No, yeah, and it doesn't work like that. You have to acknowledge everything going on, but you also have to provide solutions, or not even a solution, at least a kind of pathway. Like try this. Here's this prayer. Here's like the root of this, and here's another saint who went through something similar to you.
Yeah,
and that's what we need. And it's really hard for people.
Podcasts where they discuss stuff like this.
Yeah, they're right here, just like you and me.
Yeah,
check it out.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it go like so people who might not have faith. We speak in a little broader terms. It's when you don't have something to anchor yourself in,
right?
Whether it's faith, some kind of religion, whatever it is. You kind of just float around, you're lost, and then you are your own God.
Yeah,
your feelings and everything that's your idol, that is your God.
Right.
That's everything. And if you just keep feeding that, you're gonna be empty, and you're just gonna keep going farther and farther and farther. You can start with just depression, and then it can form into something, to a bad habit with it, like anorexia, bulimia, whatever it may be, and it just continues to go farther and further and further. And then also, if you're not getting recognition, or people just are just kind of like, all right, that they're depressed.
Yeah.
Then you go do something different. Then you go change how you look. You change your name, something crazy. And people probably understand what I'm alluding to. And then it just keeps going and going and going. I think I did that really well. I think.
Yeah, that was really good. That was really good.
But it just keeps going, and it's sad because it's truly you aren't able to actually heal.
Yeah.
You're just continuing to dig deeper into your scar, and you love it, and that's all you know. You have nothing else to go back to.
Right.
And that's scary. It's sad.
And I think that also leads to people think Catholics are absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Like, when you're not a Catholic and you're an outsider looking in and you're hearing all these opinions, especially if you're like left-winged, it sounds utterly insane. But to us, it's like, of course it's this way. Like, of course it's this way, which is why, like, I appreciate so much that I can empathize with other people's opinions. And it just makes it so much easier to relate to everyone. And I feel like I don't have to agree with people to be their friends. And I don't need them to think that I agree with them to be their friend either.
Yeah, it's a gift. Genuinely, it is. And more people need to have that. To be able to, like, acknowledge that we all are different. We all have different opinions. You can even be, like, Catholic and have just, like a similar political opinion, but just a little bit different. Like, we all have, like, it's all like the same human experience, but just felt and seemed differently.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's one thing that I love about this podcast, talking to converts, talking to people with like, different kind of opinions, is understanding, like, oh wait, so what I grew up knowing, everyone didn't grow up knowing that.
Right.
Like, I was homeschooled, sheltered, like I didn't know, I didn't hear a curse word until I was like in 8th grade. And I was like, that is a crazy word.
Yeah.
Teach me. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. But it's understanding that the world, there is a lot going on in that. And then get back into social media. Boom. With social media, you're connected with everybody, all these different walks of life, all these different belief systems, and it's really, really easy to get lost.
Exactly.
And that's what happens. Because you can find affirmation. That was the word I was looking for earlier. Affirmation in any group, in any type of thing. And then if you stop getting the amount that you wanted, you can jump somewhere else, and you'll find that. And there's so many different apps for that, chat groups, and anything you can find what you want. And people will give you what you want. but it's just a never-ending cycle.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
I think one of my biggest realizations recently, like probably in the last year, was that it's absolutely not about me. To go to church is not about what I feel. It doesn't matter whether I feel God's presence there. It doesn't matter how emotional I get in church. It doesn't matter if my prayers are good that day. What matters is that I am there to glorify the creator of the world who gave me life. And it makes absolutely no sense to not do that. You know what I mean? Even if I feel like, oh, you know, I don't feel God talking to me, or I just don't feel him today. So what? It's not about me. Glorifying God is absolutely not about me. He deserves glory because he is, like, you know, the king of the universe.
Yeah.
He is everything. And so whether or not I feel like, you know, I'm a human, I'm not divine. Who am I to say, you know, what God is doing in my life? Who am I to assume whether he's there or not?
Mm-hmm.
Whether I feel it or not, he deserves to be praised.
Yeah, 100%. That's there's that thing going around right now. It's like, what the one thing that left out of the Bible is like your opinion.
Right.
It's like I'm like, that's funny, but it's true. And it's a weird thing to say, and sometimes it feels a little weird. But it isn't about you.
Yeah.
It's about God, about worshiping God.
Right.
I remember something that I wanted to ask you. You talked about like how this kind of all started when you were 15,
right?
Where you just couldn't like kind of handle like anxiety. Was there any like triggers or anything leading up to that you just kind of like pushed aside that you really didn't think about?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, like I said, I had like some difficult experiences, and I kind of was just like, let me never think about this again, and, you know, bury it really deep down so that I never have to deal with it again. And then I kind of started, you know, like gaining consciousness, but as a teenager, you know, starting to form your own opinions and, like, you know, seeing the world from a bit of a different perspective than you do when you're a child and all you do is agree with your parents. And I kind of, like I said, I realized like I knew nothing about myself, or like I had anger problems for a while. Like I was angry at everyone and everything for every reason all the time. And like I through that I was like, wow, what even are emotions? Have I ever experienced one? Also, why do I have so many? Like, I was like, what is going on? You know, I was in puberty, you know, that's part of it. And it was just like, yeah, it was, sorry, I laugh about it now. It's not funny. It's not funny. Like my like rebellious teenage years, like I did a lot of damage, like irrevocable, you know, but it's kind of funny to laugh about now, but you know, yeah, I mean, it's like unavoidable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know that there was a pinpoint trigger of, sorry, stop. I don't know that there was like an actual like thing that I can pinpoint that was like, it brought all of this on, you know. It was more gradual. It was at the beginning of the year that I started experimenting with cutting and started kind of realizing like, I don't know how to act properly ever. And then it was at the end of the year that I told my parents I'm having problems with eating. I actually never told my parents that I was a cutter. One of my brothers did that. Thank you, Nick.
Wow. Called out.
Thanks. And that's why I got thrown in therapy. Thank you, Nick. But yeah, so it was definitely, it was a year-long process, definitely, from the point where I was like, what's happening, to like, I'm never getting out of this. So yeah, it was a very slow process.
Did someone like, so I'm always curious like how that kind of starts, like or the anorexia, like is something like, or even the cutting, like did someone like tell you about it, or is it like something you saw on TV, music, or kind of where'd that like?
Right. So with cutting, I knew someone in my very young childhood. I knew someone who was a cutter. And so I had like a general knowledge of what it was and what it was supposed to accomplish. But that's absolutely like, that's like a scapegoat. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I knew someone who did this, so I tried it because of them. Absolutely not. I made my own decisions. I'm responsible for that 100%. but I did have knowledge of what it was.
Okay.
So when I started experiencing like just feelings of being overwhelmed but not wanting people to know, I was like, what can I possibly do to like stop that from boiling over? You know what I mean? I don't want my emotions to just like explode and everyone to know that I'm like a freak with emotions. Oh my gosh. So I was like, you know, I might as well give it a try. And so I did. Don't do that, by the way. Don't give it a try. Don't ever give it a try, okay? If you see like a bad decision, don't be like, let me just try it. Don't do that.
No,
That's like
it's such a
so
dumb
pointless.
thing.
And it's not going to help you in the long run. And then with anorexia, that was definitely more my control center obsession. People really like to think that it's like, oh, social media gave you anorexia. It didn't. I didn't follow like skinny models or anything. I was like a horse girl. I was obsessed with horses, and all I did was like watch unicorn pony videos all day. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't. I did not like perceive that there were like, oh, like these are the the beauty standards that I should be living up to. Did I know that there were people who were skinnier than me? Yeah, and I wanted to be skinnier than them, basically. Like I wanted to be the epitome of control, of like self-control. I wanted someone to look at me and be like, wow, she definitely did that like herself. You know what I mean? Like she controlled herself to the point where she's like unhealthy, which again, it sounds really crazy, but that's a sick mindset. Like, and people, you call it like the sick body, basically, when you were anorexic. And like, obviously, I still like see photos of myself when I had a sick body and a sick mind, but it doesn't really bug me anymore because I'm like, I'm so past the point where I need control over everything because I have given that vulnerability to God. And I know that I don't need to look a certain way or act a certain way or even feel a certain way to be valid in my own identity.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like I need to be the skinniest person in the room anymore. Thank God.
That's good.
Yeah. I remember when I first got like introduced to cutting.
Right.
So I was really, really sheltered. I remember I was in Spanish class. I think it was a sophomore in high school or freshman. Freshman in high school. And I just like turned to my buddy next to me, and he's sitting there with a plastic knife just going ham. And I'm like, what is going on?
Right.
Like I was just this innocent Catholic little homeschool. I had no idea he had issues. Like he was going through something. I would say issues like in a bad way. He was going through something. And then I asked him about it, and then he opened up, and we had a lot of really great conversations. And we would go to it was a Christian like group at the church. We had a really awesome little pastor. I forget his name. Ken was his name.
Yeah.
He was an awesome pastor. I don't know where he's at now, but we would have really good talks, and then that kid was able to like really change his ways, and just because like, it was a cry for help,
Right.
in that sense, because he did it obviously in a classroom,
Yeah.
and also it was, I don't want to go there, but it was just a cry for help,
Right.
and it opened up conversations,
Yeah.
and he was able to. He's doing really, really well now. Which is beautiful to see. And also like something also should be said. If you're going through something, it's not the end of the world, and
Right.
you will be okay.
Exactly.
And a lot of people just think it's the end. It's to go, I can't get this is it. I'm just done.
And that's completely valid too, because like we've all felt that way at some point in our lives, like that, like I'm never gonna get out of this. You know what I mean? And that emotion is so real, even if in hindsight, like that wasn't true at all. But like I still understand why I felt that way, because it was a difficult situation. It's just so hard to see outside of yourself when we as humans are self-centered.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get trapped because they think that because they have the power to get into something like that they'll automatically have the power to get out, which I think is true depending on how long you do it, right? Like if you had just started or something like that, you haven't been doing it for that long, like you haven't fully gotten yourself into it, you can get yourself out, right? In some cases.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, I think a lot of people put themselves in that point where they've gone literally too far, and you have to realize like it's okay to reach out to people. Right. Because at that point, if you can't get it out, you've lost control. You need someone to get you out because you can't. Like you've proven to yourself time and time again that like you can't get out anymore, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, you must reach out to people.
Yeah.
Because you need, like, for example, like your boyfriend.
Yeah.
You needed him to say that to you, right? To a certain extent, like, and that's true, like in many cases for many different people that experience not the same thing but similar things, right? You need someone to tell you to get out of it.
Yeah.
So we're telling you on the podcast, you need to get out of it, but it's not obviously strong enough because you're not hearing it, physically in person, which I think is really powerful, but
Yeah.
get out of it.
You get out of it. Yeah. And that's why you have like family.
Right.
You have
Yeah.
brothers that can be annoying and tell your parents something that you don't want them to hear,
Right.
but it gets you to kind of where you need to be. That's why you have
That's
significant
why
others.
confession is so important.
Right.
And yeah, a lot of it is really unfortunate. I think in some cases, like confession, even now, is in the way that it needs to be carried out now. I don't think it's enough for what some people need it to be, because some people need that conversation with the priest. So in some of those cases, I think more people. One thing that I think society needs more of nowadays is spiritual directors.
Yes.
Not enough people have spiritual directors.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of that is due to the fact that we just don't have enough priests.
Yeah.
Because there aren't enough priests to be able to spiritually direct the amount of people that need spiritual direction. But the thing is, like, if you're a person that desperately needs that help, you need to desperately seek out a spiritual director.
Yeah.
Because you don't realize how much you actually need one. Because just going to confession is good, because to a certain extent you are getting that spiritual healing.
Right.
But there is a very, very physical, chemical aspect of like your addiction, right? And that needs to be dealt with in a very physical way.
Yeah.
Which needs to come out through just like general spiritual direction of conversation with a priest. Yeah.
Going cold turkey doesn't work for everybody.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, and there's also more strength in saying that you need help.
Right.
And people think it's just showing weakness. No, you're showing strength. It's like the most powerful thing you can do is say, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I need someone to help me.
It can also be really hard when people are stuck in a cycle of feeling like their addiction is part of their identity. And that was what it was for me, was like, if I'm not a cutter, then who am I? Like, I've been doing this for so long that like this is embedded in me. Like it's my nature at this point. And I had to kind of be absolutely humbled by my boyfriend and reminded that it's not, because God made your nature, and that is obviously not of God if it's tearing you away from the church. So yeah, thank you for humbling me. I still didn't like it though.
No.
Okay.
It sucks. Yeah.
And that's where I always think, like, I try to think in the broader sense, like, how can we help more people in those sense that who might not have that rooting in God, that you are a child, and like they have those beliefs, and it's hard. I can't right now think of a way that like get you back to a certain level.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
It's different for everyone, and it's so difficult.
Feels so bad. I feel sad for them. And that's why we just got to pray for them. And we also need you to be examples of it. And also that's why this podcast is super, super cool. And you being on here talking about this stuff, because it's could be used as a way where someone hears that and they go, oh, wait a minute, there is hope. I'm not just someone who has depression. I'm not just someone who has anxiety. I am a person who is loved.
A person with potential.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We all have potential. We all have. We're given the gifts of having. You can do anything, genuinely, and it's crazy. We're just two random dudes from Akron, Ohio. Now we're on the internet.
Well, we're not from Akron.
We're not.
Yeah,
We're almost from Akron now.
Don't say that.
Do you have a 330 yet?
No, I have 234.
815, baby. It's like that. We're recording in Akron.
To be fair, though, I never actually had 703. We're talking about phone number.
Right.
Yeah, you're
By
good.
the
Yeah.
way.
I'm
Which area code is Akron?
Oh no. I'm
No, which area?
Oh,
code?
330.
Oh, wait, no,
I am
actually, I
330,
apologize.
so
That's not
just
true.
saying.
My first ever phone number was a 703 number.
Yeah, I'll never get 303. I can't. 330.
I'm 330.
330.
Sorry.
Hey, 330 represent, baby.
That was almost close. But yeah, there's hope. People like it. Just that's what I was saying. Live my example. Being an example everywhere you go, and it's really, really difficult because you get around certain people. You're doing certain things. You just want to act, talk a certain way.
Yeah.
Even before we started recording the podcast, it's hard. We have like that kind of base we always fall back to.
Yeah.
But always trying to consciously build each other up and trying to be better. And in doing that, when we put ourselves into different situations around other people that might think differently, they'll question, like, okay, why is that person happy? They went through something similar to me. We look different. Why is that? And that's beautiful. Being inquisitive and having curiosity is awesome.
Right.
And that's what we need to be doing as Catholics and Christians, is just being a little bit better every single day.
Right.
And that doesn't need to be crazy. It's literally the smallest little thing.
Yeah, I always think about it. There's like an image that I've had in my mind. I don't know where I got this image from, but the image is, your spiritual life is, we all have that moment of realizing where we're at our lowest. And, unfortunately, you can always go lower, right? There is always the potential of you being able to go lower. But for the most part, like when you realize that you've had a really low spot in your life,
Did it die? And we're back, Ben Cook.
so your spiritual life is kind of like a stair, right? It's a stair with no barricades on either end, right? You recognize where your baseline is, where your lowest is, and then you want to climb up from that. So it's hard to go up the stairs, but a stair without a barrier, the higher that you go, right, the higher that you can easily just fall right back down, because there's all these so it's easy to fall down, but there's no easy way to go back up, right? You have to continually go up that staircase, right? But it's really easy to fall down. This is what I found so true for myself, is that, I tend to have those falls. No one just decides to go walk back down the stairs. Right. And so, but it's really cool once you have that baseline set, that's the lowest that you'll ever go.
Yeah.
That gives you this big sense of improvement of like, okay, if I can just manage to just keep on going, just keep on going.
Right.
I'm never going to fall down again. I'm never going to choose to walk back down. I'm just going to try my hardest to just walk. I'm just going to try to go forward, just continually move myself forward. And once you kind of get that mindset down, you just never really fall again. It's having the straight and narrow path, right? That's why they call it the straight and narrow path.
Right.
Because it's really easy to fall off either end, right? But there's only one way forward.
And it's true that the closer you get to God, the more the enemy will attack you. So the higher you climb, the harder you're going to fall. But then with the graces that you're granted through the Catholic Church and the sacraments, it's easier to climb back up.
Yeah, that gives us the ability to climb back up. Like if you're talking about stairs, it gives you the wood and the nails, the hammer, you know what I mean? Be able to build that. And also I wanted to say too, like your emotions, like when you have them, they are good.
Right.
Like it's good to have emotions.
Especially for women. I just want to say, women, feel emotions, okay? Women are supposed to feel emotions, and they're supposed to feel more emotion than men. And don't let anyone tell you that, like, you should try to conceal that, because that's really damaging. You need to be able to let your emotions out, even if it's just with like a few select people that you confide in. You should have that support group where you feel like you can be completely open with your emotions, because that is a very healthy outlet to have as a woman.
Yeah, and especially even for men too.
Right.
Yeah, it's like it's more for everyone, but men for some reason, I mean, not for some reason, we know why. Men are always told to don't feel emotions,
right.
don't cry, throw some dirt on it, you'll be fine.
Right.
And I'm not saying to go just start crying all the time or going and oversharing, but acknowledge you feel a certain way.
And let yourself feel that.
Yes, and do something about it. If you just sit and sulk all the time, it's like, oh, I feel this way. You need to do something about it.
Right.
Like there's like the one big huge graduation video it was a commencement address, like go make your bed, like get your life in order.
Right.
I think it's what is it?
Make your bed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're good. It's been important to change something. Except for men, I feel like it's structure is really important for us, and it's, I don't want to say it's easier, but for me it seems easier. It's like just make your bed, go to the gym, eat right, certain those little things, and you'll kind of feel better. And I think people will misconstrue that a lot. There's social media influencers online say, oh, if you feel depressed, do push-ups. Like, it's not that simple, because depression is real, and everyone feels sad, and also has the more, like, there's chemicals stuff that makes people be more sad than others.
Right.
Acknowledge that, figure out ways to kind of healthy ways to cope with that, and really, really dig into that. Pray, go to adoration, receive the sacraments, get as much grace as you can from God, and then also in your normal life, do little things better.
Right.
Like if you are getting enough sleep, eating right, and working out, your life is so different.
Oh my gosh, it's so true.
It's crazy, and it's like everyone says that on the internet. Everyone says that.
But
because
no one wants to hear it.
No one wants to hear it, and no one will
it.
do it either.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
one's
Like
doing
it's like I find it so crazy. Comes around January, everyone's like, "Oh, I'm gonna work out, be
Yeah.
healthy this year." The gyms are crazy packed for a month, and then it's just gone,
Yeah.
gone because it's hard. It doesn't feel good, and then you also, if you are addicted to a certain emotion or having like being depressed and having those type of things, it's when you were pulling yourself out. It's like, well, no, that sucks. Now I'm losing that part. I want to go back to
Right.
it. And it's hard to kind of grow up and then acknowledge that, like,
Yeah.
one of the hardest things for people to acknowledge is that they did something that wasn't perfectly right. I'm going to phrase it that way for a reason, because you'll be okay.
Right.
And you went through it for a reason. It's all of our paths are different. God allows us to go through certain trials and tribulations. It may not seem fair, but there's a purpose behind it, and it'll be okay. Continue to trust and lean on God. I mean, we talked about this before in another podcast, how some of the saints' lives were just horrible.
Right.
Like one's coming to mind right now is her whole life wasn't horrible. It was Saint Maria Goretti. She's a beautiful young, loved Jesus. I think she was like 14 years old. She got confirmed, and then someone wanted to defile her, and she said just no. And then she got stabbed like 14 times or something like that. Then forgave. Like, if most people look at that, she didn't deserve that, but the opportunity that she got from that, and now she's in heaven, it gets insane.
Right.
Like the world is weird. After we got into the fall from man, there's sin that exists. The world is weird. Just rely and trust on God. Everything will work out in some kind of end. And also, we need to, as Catholics, we're really good at this. Is remember your death, right? Remember that this world is not permanent. What we do here will pass. We're living for eternal life. We are living to be with God one day, and to understand everything here will be gone. Go to that next step.
Right.
People are just it's so easy to think about here.
Yeah, because no one wants to go outside of their comfort zone.
No, and it's also I mentioned before, it's hard to think about too.
Right.
Like the concept of heaven, the concept of Trinity, the concept
Because
of faith. It's just,
we don't understand eternity as humans. We can't comprehend anything that God has planned.
No.
So it's like faith is truly going into it blind with this just immense love for God, and that's exactly how you should go about it. Is just trust, and that helps so much with anxiety. Like in my own personal experience, I've never been medicated for anxiety, and I found that the best medication for anxiety is talking to God, is just praying about it. And I don't think that having anxiety means that you don't trust God. I think that having anxiety is a normal reaction to being a mortal human, and to, knowing that you have to just sort of surrender. Of course you're going to be anxious about that, but that doesn't mean that you love God less or that you trust him less. It's just like, that is such a normal reaction. And it's, I'm not going to say it's impossible to like reduce your anxiety. Of course it's possible, but it's like, you shouldn't have to feel like that you need to get rid of your anxiety to be a good Catholic or be a good religious person, because, a lot of saints had anxieties. Jesus had anxiety before going on the cross. He was anxious, take this away from me, Lord. He was begging to just have this cup passed from him. And I really think that being anxious is an opportunity for God to comfort you.
Yeah, and a way to lean on God.
Right.
But this has been absolutely fantastic. I truly appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. But like I said in the beginning, this is like we like our guests leave a final thought, call to action. So this is your time.
Okay.
That's your camera.
My final thought is just to encourage everyone to remember that it's not about you, that your relationship with God isn't about you, and that he is always there, and he is always gracious, and he is always loving, and that there are other people going through this too, and you just need to look for them because they are everywhere. So
Beautiful.
Do it right, do it good.
Yes, and if you are struggling going on anything, we said this before, seek help.
Right.
Go to your priest, go to your parents. They love you, and it will be okay.
Right.
And you will not be judged for that. There's more strength in that. But thank you again, Gianna, and this has been the Just Like You Me podcast. We'll see you next time.
Awesome.
Boom.